Hello, and I want to wish you a warm welcome to this month's episode of Altitude. I'm Rachel Gardner-Poole, a Sustainable Aviation Consultant at NATS, and also the Chair of Green Aviation Insights, or GAIN, an initiative you'll hear about later today. It's great to be your host today, particularly as it's a topic that I feel really passionately about. Can aviation collaborate its way to net zero? Now, climate change can be seen as one of the most challenging issues of our time. As air traffic grows and the skies become busier, the industry faces that defining question: can collaboration rather than competition be the key to cutting aviation's carbon footprint? So in this episode of Altitude, we're going to hear from air navigation service providers, including NATS in the UK, Skeyes in Belgium, and CANSO, the global voice of airspace. All of these organisations are turning the net zero commitment into measurable change. Now, as a reminder, you can submit questions to our expert panels during the show. We have already had some questions submitted in advance, so thank you for that. So I'm now going to hand over and allow our three panellists to introduce themselves. So we have Michelle Bishop, Magdalena Wass, and Ronnie Friel. So Michelle, over to you.
Thank you, and thank you, Rachel, for inviting me to participate in this. I agree with you. This is a fascinating topic, and I look forward to the discussion. My name is Michelle Bishop. I am the Director of Programs at CANSO. I oversee our global programs and also in that capacity sit on the Air Transport Action Group, a broad industry coalition working on these issues as well, and sit as a member of the ICAO Committee on Aviation Environmental Protection.
Thank you, Michelle. And Magdalena.
Hi, I'm Magdalena. I work as an ATM environmental expert at Skeyes, a Belgian air navigation service provider. A little bit about Skeyes. Skeyes is an autonomous public company managing one of the busiest and most complex airspace in Europe. We're responsible for keeping air traffic safe and efficient, but sustainability became also one of our main priorities. I'm part of the dedicated sustainable aviation team, and in my role, I get to combine my data analysis background with my passion for contributing to greener future, in this case for aviation. I think it's a really rewarding area to work in, especially now that sustainability is becoming such an important part of how we shape the future of air traffic. And I'm really happy to be speaking here today.
Thank you, Magdalena. And Ronnie.
Hi, good afternoon, Rachel. Let me echo that sentiment. It is a pleasure to be here this afternoon and to join the discussion, so thank you for the invitation. So my name is Ronnie Friel. I am the head of network operations with NATS. As I'm sure many of you will be aware, NATS are responsible for providing the air navigation services for the UK, both the domestic airspace and for our own oceanic airspace out to 30 West. NATS also manages around 23% of all European traffic in one way or another in some of the most densely packed airspace in the world. That in itself provides significant challenges across multiple performance metrics, of which environmental performance and sustainability is a key one of them. And I'm really keen to discuss what NATS have learned on our journey over the last decade or so.
Thank you, Ronnie. And so as you can see, we've got a real fantastic panel today. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion. But I'm going to kick us off with a high-level question, which is around aviation, which is often seen as one of the hardest sectors to decarbonise. And certainly very often in the aviation industry, we focus very much on things like the aircraft themselves, be that delivering alternative fuels like SAF, hydrogen, battery electric, or new generation of aircraft, which use lighter materials and much more efficient engines. So if that's the case, as we're looking towards how we get to net zero by 2050, what do you think the value is in air navigation service providers collaborating? Because ultimately, air navigation service providers, it's often thought the contribution to that net zero target will be relatively small compared to these other initiatives that are happening. So Ronnie, can I start with you, please, and talk about your experience with NATS?
Yes, certainly. So as I mentioned, this is a journey that NATS have been on for a significant period of time now. Internally, as an organisation, we have very specific targets around being a zero emission company by 2035 and being carbon negative by 2040. Now, the principal opportunity is around shared targets and alignment of metrics to enable collaboration. What NATS took on back in 2012 was a standardised approach to measuring environmental performance, which was our three-dimensional insights, or 3DI metric, which actually became part of our regulatory performance criteria. NATS is quite different in terms of the way the organisation is structured, and that we are financially incentivised by a regulator to provide a certain level of performance to our customers. Now, the fact that environmental performance was introduced in 2012 as part of that was a fantastic step forward to our overall targets and wishes to improve environmental performance. Now, to that end, what 3DI has given us is effectively a baseline over the last, as I mentioned, 2012 until now, 13 years or so, a baseline to determine our success as an organisation internally in terms of how we go about improving environmental performance. Now, that baseline has then allowed us to really challenge ourselves again internally to improve year on year. Now, what I can say is, since the implementation of 3DI, we've enabled savings of greater than 6 million tonnes of CO2, which is not insignificant. I'm sure you would agree. Now, that's not enabled in itself through the target or the metric. That's enabled through change, through real change, be it technology, be it operations, be it learning. So what I would say is, if that's the journey NATS have been on, we now recognise the absolute importance of collaboration with our neighbours, both our direct neighbours across FIR boundaries, our European neighbours and our global partners. So in order for us to start to collaborate properly and achieve the desired outcomes, we first of all need to start speaking the same language. We need to truly understand and align ourselves on how we measure environmental performance, and then again have a consistent baseline that we all recognise and can hold each other to in terms of what we are doing as individual organisations and as an industry. So that in itself then leads to the collaboration, which leads to enablement, and that then directs our activities and prioritises them to deliver the best possible outcomes collectively.
No, thank you, Ronnie. And I think that just shows, doesn't it? That's just one ANSP and the carbon emission savings that they've been able to realise. And you just think, wow, if that was rolled off across the world, there'd be significant benefit worldwide. But let's hear from skeyes. So Magdalena, what has skeyes been doing?
So we're mainly focusing on improving flight efficiency. It's something that we can all act on today. But of course, it requires close cooperation between all stakeholders. Of course, not all inefficiencies can be eliminated, as constraints such as weather, separation minima, or restricted areas still need to be managed. But at skeyes, we're working on several practical ways to improve flight efficiency. It's through initiatives such as continuous descent operations, better use of military airspace with flexible use of airspace, airspace redesign, and targeted ATC training programs. We're also planning to launch an internal study to see how we can further optimize continuous climb operations. But yeah, collaboration plays a central role in all these efforts. A concrete example is our participation in collaborative environmental management meetings, CM. It's a framework developed by Eurocontrol that brings together ANSPs, airports, and airlines. And for us, these meetings are a great opportunity to share perspectives and understand each other's constraints, and to work on concrete initiatives that help reduce fuel burn and emissions. They also contribute to noise reduction around airports, which is really important for local communities, of course. On a larger scale, skeyes is involved in several European projects and working groups. We're also a member of FABEC. It's a joint airspace bloc that brings together Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Germany, France, and Switzerland, so our neighboring countries, with the aim of improving air navigation efficiency and the framework of a single European sky. And all these actions together, they, in my opinion, they lay a good foundation for long-term meaningful change in aviation.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And as I said, it's great to hear. That's just 2 ANSPs of everything that's happening in this space. So I'm now going to turn to Michelle, and it'd be great to hear kind of more the global aspect and particularly what CANSO are doing.
Absolutely. To back to the question, it is true that ATM's contribution to the overall road to net zero is small, but as Ronnie and Magdalena's comments showed, the value of the ATM contribution is early action. There is real complexity about our decarbonization path related to technology and aircraft changes and related to the ramp up in production rates of sustainable aviation fuels. But the value in what ATM can deliver is that many of the big measures that we can contribute to are today's technologies. It's not tomorrow's technologies. We don't need to wait. And the value of early action and contributing over time from now to 2050 in reducing excess emissions is absolutely key for us. And that's been part of the message that CANSO has been beating the drum on for a while now. And that's part of the reason that we launched our GreenATM environmental accreditation program for ANSPs, is to incentivize and help lay out that path of continuous improvement of the things that ANSPs can do in order to contribute to the industry's, collaborative goal for net zero. But early action is that key. And there was great examples by both Ronnie and Megla of the things that we can be doing right now to make real difference.
No, that's great. Thank you. And just all three of you actually talked about collaboration, which obviously was the title of the session. Can you kind of give any more examples about what that looks like in practice, but in particular, what gets in the way of that happening? So it's great to talk about collaboration, but sometimes it's much harder to do collaboration. So Michelle, what's your thoughts on this? Yeah,
I mean, we as an industry are great at collaboration in the day-to-day. Our operational units, work with our customer partners and airport partners in making the system run every day, in adjusting the system when there is severe weather and making sure it operates as efficiently as possible. Collaboration is a little more challenging when we start talking at a higher level and in the long run. And there really are challenging issues where short-term interests and long-term interests don't necessarily align. And that's where the dialogue gets a little more challenging. Mm-hmm. But I do say in the forums in which I participate on behalf of the ATM community, there is a great passion and a great determination to move this forward, to do the things we can do, and make the investments needed in order to adjust the system in a significant way. So both at the Air Transport Action Group and at CAPE and the multitude of other forums that I participate in, there is a real across the industry commitment, but that long-term, short-term issue continues to be a factor, and we've got to take the long-term view on this.
No, absolutely agree. And Ronnie, what's your thoughts about this, both in terms of good collaboration examples, but areas where, again, it may be challenging?
So let me start with this, just to pick up on what Michelle had mentioned a moment ago there. It's our position that there is a significant amount that ATM can do in the now to really move the dial on a number of different performance measures, be it our environmental performance, our capacity, our delay management, punctuality. And that in itself is a core belief which we hold at NATS, which is if we only measure one thing, we only improve one thing. And that's really a key message, particularly around the conversation on collaboration, because we need to ensure that as an industry, we are holistic in our assessment of both our performance and what good looks like. Because the reality is that if we chase down single lens improvement, that it may be to the detriment of other performance metrics. So we need to be really honest with ourselves in the now around A, what's achievable, and B, how do we go about doing that whereby actually it's not single lens. We can improve multiple different performance metrics at the same time, as long as we truly understand the problem. And that point on understanding the problem is I suppose where Green Aviation Insights comes in. It's how do you get the data, not just the data, the analysis, the insight to determine trend and or hotspots that then become clear to all cross-border, be it flows, be it particular pieces of airspace, it can be anything. But ultimately that becomes the starting point for improvement. So if I provide an example of what collaboration has looked like for NATS this year, I would start with the use of the air traffic management portal in collaboration with MUAC and our German partners. So we've seen an opportunity as our customers had been requesting through various forums that we proactively, to Michelle's point, proactively look for opportunities to improve, to provide them with information that they can work with to enable benefit. We've seen the air traffic management portal as a direct enabler within the tactical environment to really start to move the dial on cost, on track miles flown, on emission. Now I'm pleased to be able to say that so far this year, after implementation in January, we have now enabled 1.6 million kilograms of CO2 saving through the implementation of that system alone. So the system itself is simply an enabler. It provides an opportunity, which then a customer makes a decision upon. But these enablers become key in the collaborative phase because that's the so what. So the insight gave us the information. Now, as an industry, it's incumbent upon us to do something with that information. The second example I would offer, which moves away from technical solution and goes to an airspace solution, is bilateral work with AirNav Ireland, where AirNav came to us and highlighted they had an environmental inefficiency flying into Cork Airfield. Now that was around our continuous descent, continuous climb profiles. So we've worked together jointly as ANSPs to come up with a modification to the airspace which covers both of those ANSPs to a joint benefit, which now directly enables continuous climb, continuous descent. So these are small actions which ultimately come together to provide cumulative benefit, which becomes truly measurable. And when you scale it, ANSP to global, these opportunities are significant for us all.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was great to hear those very specific, clear, measurable examples we've got there. And Michelle, I'd like to come back to you, and if you could just talk a bit about, Ronnie mentioned about GAIN, Green Aviation Insights, which is a global collaboration of ANSPs. But Michelle, can you just explain a bit more about GreenATM as well, and particularly the collaborative aspects of that as well?
Yeah. One of the joys of working in the industry that we work in is we are in general not competitors of each other. So there is a delightful sharing of information, of best practice, of here's what we did and here's how it worked for us and you can do it too. And other industries that are a little more competitive don't see that type of sharing, and it's part of what I love about this industry. So about 3 years ago, I think, we launched the CANSO GreenATM Environmental Accreditation Program. It assesses ANSPs based on 24 different topics in which they can influence environmental benefit. The topics are not evenly assigned points. They are very purposely unevenly assigned points because we wanted to, through the design of the program, incentivize action in the areas where we know there is the biggest potential for benefit. So we designed it specifically that way, and we are seeing a lovely uptake in the program of ANSPs that are coming forward to be independently assessed as to how they're doing. We rate them across 5 levels as to how they are doing and the maturity of their efforts across all of those various topics in which we can influence environmental benefit. We are seeing ANSPs now who are using the program's design to make improvements in their own programs, or those who are actively participating who we will give a report to on, here's how you've done, here's the additional areas you should focus on in the next few years. But even those who aren't in the program, we're having conversations where they're actively using it to see where they should be focused and where they can make improvements. So that's delightful to see. It's one of the side benefits of accreditation programs is, as silly as it sounds, the competition between ANSPs of, I got a level 2 this year and I'm going to get a level 3 next year. And that's a wonderful side benefit. We want to see those kinds of actions and those kinds of drives to identify improvements. And a large part of the program is at the higher maturity levels is understanding your metrics and how you monitor your environmental impacts and the excess emissions that are driven in your airspace and your CDO rates and all of those sorts of things, and how you do active target setting around that and drive improvements, exactly as Ronnie was saying, that NATS has been doing at the higher levels of maturity in the program. It really is a lot about performance measurement and driving performance benefits through that.
No, and it's great to hear about that healthy competition. That was something I was actually going to ask you about. Can you see competition being a benefit? But absolutely, there are positive ways of having that healthy competition within organisations or between organisations. So Magdalena, we've talked about GreenATM. As I said, we also talked about GAIN, two different kind of things, but people can sometimes, I've heard people say, why do we need to join GAIN if we're already part of GreenATM, and vice versa. So Magdalena, I know skeyes is part, in fact, you're a founding member of Green Aviation Insights. You're also involved in GreenATM. So can you just talk a bit about how you think both of these schemes and initiatives complement each other?
Yeah, I think indeed, as you said, GAIN and GreenATM complement each other in helping ANSPs improve their environmental performance. What I find most valuable about GAIN is that it can help ANSPs spot inefficiencies, but also compare their performance with others and learn from each other. That's very important. While GreenATM, it provides a nice framework to assess and improve environmental practices. And it's addressing both operational processes, but also company-wide initiatives. And I think together, they give ANSPs practical tools to take action. I believe that GAIN can really support ANSPs on their journey to achieving GreenATM accreditation. At skeyes, for example, we are fully committed to aviation sustainability, which is why we decided to engage with GreenATM. This really allowed us to understand where we stood and strategically define areas for improvement. So last year, skeyes received the CANSO GreenATM Level 3 accreditation, and it recognized our efforts to reduce both our own environmental impact and also the emissions of the airspace we manage. And this year, skeyes, as you said, is a part of the founding member group of GAIN. We help shaping the platform, we help to test it, analyze results, but also learn from each other to find new ways to better identify inefficiencies. And I think all this work supports our ongoing efforts towards level 4 of the GreenATM accreditation that we hope to achieve this year.
No, that's great. Thank you, Magdalena. Now I'm going to go off on a slightly different tack now, because we've got a couple of questions in that have come in from our audience. And this is now really looking at different fuel types and still related to airspace in one sense. Obviously, people often say that the best fuel is the fuel you don't burn. So the better we can do an ATM, the less fuel you're going to need. But one of the questions was about electric aircraft. And it's whether ANSPs, air navigation service providers, are actually going to need to redesign airways in the future to accommodate these kind of aircraft, so like electric aircraft or other aircraft in the future. So, Michelle, how has this been looked at kind of globally?
We are looking at the expected entry into service dates and mix in the fleet of those types of things. Obviously, one of the biggest impacts on air traffic management will be the eVTOL class that is really set to change the game as far as urban air mobility in a lot of communities, and that is going to drive new service requirements for safe operations in communities. But then as far as reducing the traditional emissions, we are starting to see, you know, good work being done on electric fixed wing and electric hybrid aircraft in the smaller seat classes. The question is redesigning of routes, I think. Putting aside advanced air mobility and urban air mobility in cities, we're not seeing as much of a need for that. I think that we do anticipate, as electric fixed wing comes on board, that it may offset some of the smaller commuter aircraft and may increase flight frequency between some cities, because it is going to be available at smaller seat classes. We're also having larger conversations about the impact of electric aircraft on things like our service charge structure. You know, our service charges in most ANSPs are set based on weight of the aircraft, as a proxy for payload and value available for the aircraft in doing its commercial business. That calculation changes a little bit for electric aircraft, which are expected to be considerably heavier, and we don't want to inadvertently penalize electric aircraft because of a weight-based charge. So things like that we're starting to have conversations around. So there will certainly be changes in the airspace and the service. But I don't see it from traditional airports as much as a different routing at this point.
Thank you. And while you've got the mic, Michelle, it'll be Louis has also asked about hydrogen, so another fuel type. And what's the panel's view on that? What's your view on hydrogen?
Hydrogen is an exciting potential. We are not anticipating that it is going to play a significant role by 2050. A lot of the time projections for hydrogen are moving slightly to the right. In the longer term, it has significant potential to contribute to the decarbonization of the industry, but its contribution by 2050 is not something that we can really rely on as being significant at this point.
Thank you. And Magdalena, can I just go back to the electric aircraft question, which came from Ruben, and about redesigning airways? It'd be good to know, you know, what skeyes has been doing on this.
Yes. So for most electric aircraft, as Michelle said, it's unlikely that we'll need to change existing airways. And I will also give an example of eVTOLs, so the small electric air taxis. In this case, I will be talking about flight procedures rather than airways. So these smaller aircraft will likely operate more like helicopters, flying at lower altitudes under visual flight rules, VFR, with a pilot on board. So we already have these procedures in place, so there is no need to change them. But overall, the technology is still evolving, so I think it's too early to know if any adaptations will be needed. For Belgium, so far, the industry hasn't requested any changes.
Thank you. And then another question we also had from the audience was from Rob. And again, it's kind of looking at that broader aviation effects and actually non-CO2 effects. So looking at things like contrails, you know, with all the ongoing research that's happening with ICAO, CESAR and wider about persistent contrails having a real major climate impact. And one of the questions was, you know, what is NATS doing in this space in terms of contrail avoidance measures? So Ronnie, I'd like to bring you in to answer that.
Certainly. Thank you, Rachel. Really good question, very topical at the moment, as I'm pleased to be able to say there's significant work going on in the background just now. I actually read a piece of research just recently which indicated that the relationship between contrails may be as impactful in terms of our global warming status as CO2 emissions. And I think that's that is a significant statement if that comes to pass under peer review. So, as is mentioned, pleased to say that that we're ahead of the game there. We actually have 2 projects running at the moment specific to Contrails. The first of which is actually Operation Blue Skies. I had the pleasure of welcoming Google to Prestwick Control Centre last month, who are providing the analytics expertise to Operation Blue Skies, which is exactly as I mentioned, it's contrail avoidance. It's what can be done in the initial phase in the oceanic airspace, what can be done where we know that there is a risk of contrail creation. Now, as I mentioned, that's underway, due to start in 2026. Now, that's a NATS initiative at the moment. However, I'm pleased to be able to say that at European level, that under our CESAR initiatives, we have Project Seconia coming, version 2 coming in the not too distant future, either hot on the heels. Now, Zirconia has the added benefit of looking at the domestic airspace as well as the oceanic airspace, as I think it's fair to say that the complexity around contrail avoidance becomes ever more challenging when you start to look at domestic airspace, domestic sectors, simply due to the nature of the trajectories that we experience through that type of airspace. So Air France, EasyJet are both involved with that, and I'm really keen to see where both projects go.
No, that's a good point about the fact of it becoming even more complex as we're going across globally in different parts of airspace. So, Michelle, what are your thoughts on this?
This is obviously an active topic of discussion, and I'm delighted to see the work that NATS and other ANSPs are doing in partnership with airlines and others in order to try and understand how we can mitigate persistent contrails and their warming impact on climate. I do think that this is an issue that in the future holds the potential to be more impactful on ATM than even our carbon efforts. Flight efficiency are things that we've worked on for a long time. But contrail avoidance, as we learn more, will redefine optimized trajectory. It will redefine how we think about what is a climate optimized trajectory. And there will be balances that need to be made between carbon and contrail impact that we need to understand more and know how to manage their impact in congested airspace. When we look at contrails globally, it's not a coincidence that the preponderance of contrails are forming in the Northern Hemisphere in areas of high congestion like the North Atlantic, like parts of Europe and North America. Those are areas in which contrail avoidance will be complex due to density of traffic. And we need the type of work that Ronnie has been mentioned to be done in order to understand what are the best operational concepts for success, for mitigating contrail climate impacts without exacerbating carbon impacts through increased fuel burn with trajectory change. So it's important work, and important work I think that we need to be doing now to get ahead of the curve on the issue.
And if you don't mind, Rachel, apologies, just to continue the conversation, as I think that this is a really interesting topic. In terms of that enablement, what does it look like in the not too distant future if we start to think about what we can do to leverage the likes of artificial intelligence to determine where contrails may form? That information then becomes part of the 4D trajectory, as Michelle has just mentioned there, but importantly within the planning phase, within the planned environment, in order that we can move away from the notion of tactical avoidance, tactical requirement for modification of flight plan, whereby we start to truly, as I said, leverage the likes of the artificial intelligence capability, free route airspace, 4D trajectories to be able to plan and adapt. I mean, that's planned to adapt in flight, potentially aircraft to aircraft based upon knowns or new information, where we can really start to see the benefits here. So these are the first steps to understand what can be done. However, what I would say is there's a significant amount of work there that we can certainly undertake as an industry to truly enable the types of benefits that we're chasing down.
And you're just talking about digitalization, AI. So Magdalena, I'll just bring you in. What are your kind of thoughts on how all of this new digital technology, when you look at how much digital technology or technology overall has, the rate of change is just phenomenal over the last 10, 20 years. How do you think that can really help us reduce emissions in ways that weren't possible before?
Yeah, I think AI is becoming an important topic across all sectors, and aviation is, of course, no exception. Digitalization means that we are getting more and more data from everyday flight operations, and AI can be a very powerful tool to process it, to analyze this data. It has a huge potential for sustainability in aviation. For example, AI can combine different data sets like weather data and radar flight trajectory data to assess the fuel consumption and emissions. And I think this knowledge can really help organizations with reducing their environmental impact. So also by analyzing traffic, weather, and airspace setup, AI can help optimize flight paths, save fuel, and make airspace use more efficient. And of course, the Contrail example was already said before. AI can be a nice application in contrail prediction as well.
Thank you. And then we've had a question come in from David, which is really about, kind of the air traffic controllers. So it's great talking about sustainability, but when it actually comes to the day-to-day, you've got priorities around safety, capacity, operational efficiency, and then you've got high traffic, airspace to manage as well. So how are we actually going to do this? Will efficiency always trump emissions? Because ultimately airlines are likely to be favouring on-time performance. So how do we kind of do all of this from a practical point of view? Vonnie, let me just hand to you first of all.
I touched on this earlier. This question is actually the key one that actually brought sustainability into network operations. This was the rationale for bringing it together. My statement is clear that sustainable operations and performance are not mutually exclusive from each other. As long as we understand the data, the systems that we are interacting with and trying to improve, then we can absolutely come up with suitable strategies that can be to the benefit of all metrics. So I'm going to use a real life example right now, just as a bit of a use case here, because I think it will help. If we give consideration to one of the UK's major airports, which is Heathrow, Heathrow is a heavily congested aerodrome due to the demand. It is our central hub. What we have undertaken as an organisation as NATS is to work in collaboration again across industry with stakeholders, including HAL, Heathrow Airports, with Heathrow Tower, ATC function, and our airline operator partners to come up with strategies that protect and enable and improve punctuality whilst minimising the impact in terms of environmental performance to the airspace, whilst all being in service of our key underpinning metric, which is safety. Now, this year, again, pleased to be able to say that we have seen both a significant improvement in Heathrow punctuality. We have seen a significant reduction in Heathrow delay, and we have also seen a significant improvement in the cumulative airborne holding net effect of our stack procedures in terms of our sustainability metric, as I mentioned earlier, 3DI. And to that end, I'm really pleased to be able to say that we've effectively broken the back of one of the key challenges that we had, which was the alignment of our 3DI metric with increasing traffic. So on the basis that that particular aerodrome has a significant impact on our overall environment, being in the centre of our London TMA airspace, we can say that actually we have reduced our expected forecast 3DI performance outcome this year by 1 point, which is more than significant. And that, as I said, that's been a really collaborative effort based around technology, such as pairwise, which is intelligent approach, around procedure, which is ATM. That's how we go about managing inbound aircraft, managing the first rotation within a really constrained environment, system dynamics, to ultimately deliver an outcome performance which has ticked the box in each of our performance criteria. That is a real success story. And to David's point, I am absolutely of the view that one does not necessarily need to be to the detriment of the other.
Michelle, building on that, so it'd be great to hear your views on that, but also it'd be good if you could kind of introduce one of the questions that came from Matan was around how you kind of balance, you've got arrival management, you've got holding patterns for country airports, which could result in aircraft holding in neighbouring airspace, effectively displacing the emissions outside of the control of that particular country. So it'd be good to just hear your views on that overall, how ANSPs, airports work together to manage that.
Yeah. I'll first completely agree with Ronnie and his last answer. These are not things that, when we're doing it well, need to be traded off. An efficient system is a safe system. An efficient system is a system that is delivering capacity. And it is our job to balance all of these things and to deliver capacity as efficiently as we can. If we are, making an ideal trajectory for one flight, but holding a bunch in order to make that happen, that is not efficiency from a network point of view. And it is our job to balance all of those things. And I think that looking at performance across the board and how we enact things that can deliver improvements in multiple areas is absolutely what we need to look at. To the question specifically about collaboration across flight information regions and across states, the short answer is it doesn't need to be counted in either state. This is why when states were negotiating the Paris Agreement, they pulled international aviation out of the Paris Agreement and had international aviation emissions treated globally by ICAO. And that's why we have global goals, not particularly state goals for did those emissions occur across this border or on the other side of that border. We don't need to count for them that way. We count for our emissions globally, and we have set global goals that will see us track towards net zero 2050, and we're working on that across the board. I think that would be my answer on that one.
No, that's great, thank you. And Magdalena, a specific example of where this has kind of happened with skeyes and how you're managing this?
Yeah, I think I agree with Ronnie and Michelle. I would add that rather than looking at whose airspace these emissions occur in, we see it as a shared responsibility across the network. And this is, for me, the perfect example why ANSPs should collaborate, why it's so important to act together as one network to make our operations more efficient and sustainable, while also keeping them safe. In the end, safety is always the priority.
Thank you. All right, we're going to need to wrap up the session soon, but I've got one final question for each of you, and that is if you could send one clear message to ANSPs, policymakers, airlines, or the public about aviation's climate journey, what would that message be? Ronnie, let me ask you first.
Okay, so I think in summary, aviation doesn't have to choose between flying and the future. Now, we can have both if we truly understand the challenge, if we truly measure what matters, and then we act together beyond borders, as we have just mentioned. That's the key messaging. The enablement of that, and I say it often, what are the enablers? Green Aviation Insights is a great start on that journey, in order that we start to speak the same language from a common platform with clear goals. I think that again enables a really promising future.
Thank you. Magdalena.
Well, we need to remember that, as Europe is the fastest warming continent, aviation must be resilient and prepare for the changes. And that's why we need to keep prioritizing sustainable solutions. So cutting emissions, reducing air pollution, and making life quieter for the communities near airports. And here, collaboration is essential. Only by working together and using the data metrics that we have, we can make smarter decisions, improve efficiency, and move towards more sustainable operations.
Thank you. And Michelle, you have the final word.
Thank you. I think that my message as a whole would be that aviation has worked hard to develop a credible plan toward net zero. It's not an easy plan. And it will require collaboration across governments, collaboration within the aviation industry, and collaboration with new partners like the energy industry, like fuel producers. Though that is a broad engagement that needs to happen so that we are all putting complete efforts towards the goal. For ANSPs, I would add on the message of the importance of early action. We don't have till 2050 to deliver our part. It will get more complex in 2050 because of growth in traffic and added congestion that makes it harder to deliver. But every gallon that we cannot emit now, as you said, is critical. And early action to deliver the ATM improvements that have been identified is absolutely critical.
Thank you. And I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, but huge thank you to our great panel, Michelle, Ronnie and Magdalena. Please do sign up for our next Altitude session, where we'll be looking at a summer retrospective and looking how we use data to plan the operation. And finally, thank you from me. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye and enjoy the rest of your day.